Garland Nixon, who joins us again on the Mother of All talk show. It's always a pleasure to see you. Let's start with what's happening in China, Garland. I was on RT America in the week when this story broke. Farhan, our colleague, said that she'd known this for about a year. I had not known it. It came as a great shock to me. It struck me as a kind of Cuban Missile Crisis moment. And from what I can see of Chinese responses, they're treating it that way. It's a serious juncture, isn't it?
It is. I tell you something interesting also about this, and that is how the revelation came about at a time when Joe Biden is his confused China policy towards China seemed to be trying to pull back a little bit when Jake Sullivan was meeting with the Chinese representative, and it seemed as though that the Biden administration wanted to kind of calm things down a bit. This came out in the Wall Street Journal from anonymous officials, and there are many security experts here who believe that this represents the divide in the neocon establishment, and that there were those who saw Joe Biden's moves as capitulation and basically did this to throw a monkey wrench in it. I would suspect the Chinese, in the same way, Vladimir Putin always says, nothing moved, has basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that nothing happens in Ukraine without him knowing it. I would imagine that nothing happens in Taiwan without the Chinese leadership knowing it. I would suspect that they already knew those troops were there. I would be shocked if they didn't. But the revelation coming out in the Wall Street Journal, it is suspected, reveals moves that are happening within the neocon establishment.
As you know, Garland, face and saving it, keeping it, is it's something for everybody, but for Chinese people in particular, it is a very pronounced characteristic of theirs. They might have known or believed, suspected that these American forces were on Taiwan, but for the world to be told it by the Wall Street Journal represents a gigantic loss of face for China. And it may be that that is what has made this now a very acute matter indeed.
Yes, and it also represents something, and that is the U.S. is extremely reckless towards China, and our leadership, and I use that word guardedly, does not recognize the importance of red lines. And when it comes to China, I suspect they're going to continue crossing red lines. I think, they're not being responsible for another reason, and that is, most security experts, when they evaluate and war game what would happen if the U.S. attempted to were to, be engaged in kinetic warfare with China, the odds are overwhelming that the U.S. would lose. And the fear is that the U.S. would lose, that would retaliate with some form of a nuclear confrontation, and that would certainly devolve into the end of all of us. So it's showing that our leaders do not understand how to operate in a multipolar world. They're talking to China as though they're talking to Guatemala or some very small landlocked country that they can easily dominate, and that's not the case.
Quite so. Now, President Xi said this week that it was a matter of national honor for China to reunify its whole territory. As I said earlier, there is no question that Taiwan is a part of its territory. This is accepted in Taiwan as well as in China, and indeed in all legal fora in the world. Taiwan is not a separate country. And this kind of recklessness could lead to China taking back Taiwan by force. Now, I saw a very dismaying opinion poll today online, admittedly from CNN, so not the most auspicious of sources, but it showed that a majority of Americans would be ready to go to war to defend what they called the independence of Taiwan.
A couple of things involved, and that is, again, it's a CNN poll. I don't know how much I trust it, but the other part of it is this: that the mainstream media has been so taken over by the intelligence community, by the Pentagon, that it doesn't surprise me, because people only hear one side of the story, and that's the neocon argument. Additionally, Americans, in hearing that, have no clue the actual, the possible outcome of this. Americans have been watching, smart bombs dropping in Iraq in 1991, or they've been watching the U.S. military go up against smaller countries, and they don't really understand the level of warfare they're talking about. Not to mention the fact that a war, going to war with your number one trade partner, would end our economy in a way that would make the 1929 crash look like the heyday of American economics.
A very good point, Garland. You know, if China decided tonight, and heaven knows why they don't, that they would no longer accept dollars in payment for goods and services they're selling overseas, that they would prefer it in euros, thank you very much, or prefer it in some other currency, this itself would be totally devastating to the American financial system and the stranglehold that the U.S. has over that financial system, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, and you bring up a good point, because the U.S. is thinking only of, its ability to have military dominance, which even now it doesn't have military dominance in that area. But additionally, China has a lot of cards that it could play. China holds $1.5 trillion in the U.S. debt, and as you said, as you mentioned or alluded to, it is the world's industrial engine. They could make moves if China determines, and think about this, it wouldn't be a bad move for China when they look at the alternatives. If the alternative is kinetic warfare with the United States, they may determine that they're willing to take an economic hit rather than a military hit to take the United States out. And then they could make economic moves. They could stop shipping things to us. They could close down some of our major technical firms all of our major technology firms who are kind of based out of there as far as their hardware. So if China determines that kinetic warfare is in order, they may just decide to use all other means to devastate the U.S. economy and just decide they'll take a hit along with us to wake the United States up.
Now, Garland, you talked about your leadership. We'll not dwell on Joe Biden. It's a sorry sight. But I watched Kamala Harris in the week talking to some school kids. And I've got to tell you, I wondered what she was on. She seemed high to me, spaced out. She was talking about space. Maybe she was just getting carried away. But I got to thinking that woman's finger might be on the trigger very soon.
Well, it may be on the trigger for a bit, but I can't see her having a lot of luck in 2024. So far, Joe Biden seems to be holding out. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But one thing is obvious in watching that, as a person who's done a lot of television, not saying that I'm good or bad at it, but I've done a lot. Kamala Harris is extremely uncomfortable in front of the camera. She has very, very poor political skills and very poor skills in front of the camera. She looked like a deer in the headlights. She started meandering and wandering around with her discussion, and it turned into a rather embarrassing word salad. So I cannot see Kamala Harris as a viable presidential candidate, as sad as as she looks when she's in front of a camera, and just totally lost. It was just an embarrassing ramble. I had to cover my eyes and put my head down to watch her.
Yes, well, I watched it twice for that reason, because I couldn't quite believe that it was real. I love that phrase, word salad. That's exactly what it was. And boy, what a salad. Now, speaking of 2024, is it true that Donald Trump has now raised more than $100 million and he hasn't even declared yet?
Yes, Donald Trump will raise plenty of money, but that's the least of their problems with Donald Trump. If you remember, he won in 2016 and Hillary Clinton outspent him 2-1. So Donald Trump had a rally in Iowa, which is a state that used to be reliably blue, but he won it in both 2016, I think by 9 points in 2016 and 8 points in 2020. He has his highest approval rating ever in Iowa at 53%. So he went right to the state where he's getting a lot of love. The thing I'm keeping an eye on, this is what I'm keeping an eye on when it comes to Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis and his relationship with Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is very, very popular in the Republican electorate. He's popular in Florida, and that's a very important state. So he could provide that those electoral votes out of Florida for Donald Trump. They seem to have an amicable relationship, and I can see a Trump-DeSantis ticket in 2024 against Harris and whoever, Pete Buttigieg is who they'd likely throw in with her, I would think, and or of course Biden Kamala, and I see Trump and DeSantis winning that, save for, and let's not forget this, save for the Biden team has the national security state and the media, but I repeat myself, on his side, and they will do everything they can to ensure that democracy does not reign, regardless of how the people vote.
Well, they tried that, of course, in 2016, and it didn't work. And they spent 4 years trying to destroy Trump's presidency, and he got more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016. So it's not that they can fix everything, Garland.
Yeah, no, it's not, but they'll certainly do everything they can. And, when you look at what's happening in China and when you read, the New York Times, the Washington Post, it is clear that the national security state sees Donald Trump and the MAGA movement as a hindrance, to say the least, against the empire's policies, the empire's move to realign to an Anglo-Saxon English-speaking only empire with the UK and the British and the US. So I think the national security state goes code red when they have any thoughts of Donald Trump winning in 2024. And they also probably understand that Donald Trump recognizes that he made some mistakes in not moving to pull out of various countries and pull out of various conflicts early enough, and that if he were to get back in, he'd be on the move doing that very soon. And I'm no Trump fan, but that's just my evaluation.
Garland Nixon, it's always worth hearing your evaluation. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.